So Cupra is the sub-brand to Seat. So Seat used to have a car called the Cupra, which is like their sporty hatch, but then all of a sudden they became a spin-off brand. Seat is a subsidiary to Volkswagen over in Spain. So there's a lot of complicated ties, but essentially this exists under the big Volkswagen portfolio of car companies. This is the SUV, or the range topping one. This is called the Formentor, and it has a couple of different models there. You have some entry-level models, you have a front-wheel drive Volkswagen GTI powered variant, and you've also got a plug-in hybrid variant, but this one here is the VZx. So it's going to have the Audi S3 source 200 kilowatt 2-litre under the bonnet. It's all-wheel drive and has a 7-speed dual clutch. But let's break down what you're getting with this car. First of all, this blue matte paint looks fantastic, and this is the launch spec for the Formentor. It looks quite nice, and the whole theme for this car is bronze and blue. Now up front we have LED headlamps, and we do have this bronze badge up front, some nice contrasting grey elements, and plenty of aero around the side. And then yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of these circular lights here at the front, but at least you have a distinct looking front end. Now along the side here we have some contrasting grey elements here on the side mirror, down the side skirts, and around on the wheel arches. We have 19-inch wheels which are bronze and black, and you also have bronze Audi sourced Brembo brakes, which are really quite cool. And how do I know they're Audi? Well, there's Audi badges all over the thing. They look fantastic, and they're massive as well. We also have some pretty sizable Bridgestone rubber, which are 245s both front and rear, and this thing does look quite sexy from the side. It looks bigger in pictures, but really you can see here's a 5'11" adult. It's sort of like a bigger hatch that looks like an SUV. And of course we can't forget those roof rails up top to make this thing just a little bit more practical. Now you've also got a roof spoiler, your rear wiper, and a pretty nice large rear light bar, which also tells you what model you're driving, which is the Formentor, when it's lit up at night here in the rear cluster, which is quite cool. We have bronze badging, which goes really nice against this matte blue paint, some more contrasting grey materials, but then down below you know you got the range topping model because you've got these real quad pipes which look very VW Audi-esque, but they look fantastic because they got a nice matte finish on them. Now this exhaust pops, burbles, and has a lot of bass to it, so here's what it sounds like. Now the Cupra Formentor has an automatic boot here in the VZx model, and you can open that from the back, your key, or from the inside. Now the boot is okay, it's like a medium-sized boot. You do have some nice little pockets on the side to hold some small items around, but it's not a massive car. So it's going to be good for about 2 suitcases before you're going to have to think about folding seats down. But you do have this nice cargo cover here, and there is a nice amount of plastic here to protect the car from when you're dragging things in and out. But also I will mention these sharp taillights are pretty brutal. Like I just sort of caught my arm on them then, so you got to be careful not to sort of snag your arm on these because they have some pretty sharp angles, which goes along with the sharp angles this car has. And if you do want to fold the seats down, you have some little pull tabs here on the side, and they do fold in a 60-40 split. But what I do like about this car is it has a ski pass-through, which means you won't get a folding middle seat, but you do have a little compartment to put some longer items through, which is very useful if you want to carry 4 people in comfort. And then underneath the boot floor, you just have a space saver kit. There's actually no spare tire for this car. Now, what I can appreciate is that this car has a pretty comfortable back seat. It may not look like it to tall adults, but there's a 5'11" adult back here. I have a decent amount of headroom, quite a lot of it actually. I've also got some nice feet room underneath these bucket seats, and I've also got a decent amount of knee room for a small SUV like this. Now in terms of what we're getting, I do like the blue leather. I also like how we have some nice sizable door bins here on our passenger door. I do like the little armrest we have here in the middle, and like I mentioned, you do have the ski pass-through. These seats are very comfortable. They look great. You have bronze stitching to contrast this blue interior, which is very much like what's happening on the outside. Now we have some extra cushioning here near the pillar, which is quite comfortable for my arms. So for long trips, I could definitely see myself sitting back here for a few hours. Now I also have my own rear climate controls back here. So we have tri-zone climate controls, and I also have 2 USB-C ports in the back, which is going to make me feel a lot more comfortable. And then in addition, we have some touch activated rear lights, which are also nice and bright and angled towards the rear passengers. So you're not going to really interrupt the other person's sleep if you need a light to read at night. Now this middle seat is a jump seat because I don't have any feet room in front of me. Instead, I have to share my feet room with the outer 2 passengers. And my head's pretty close to the roof, but I also do have enough headroom, so it's not too bad. Knee room is a bit restricted though, but overall, it's a decent car to carry 5 people for a short trip, but 4 for longer journeys. Now build quality. Doors feel nice and robust. Up on the dashboard, yep, feels good. Yep, everything, it feels quite nicely put together, but there are 2 things that I don't really like. The shifter is this sort of cheap plastic material which sort of wiggles around, which I don't really like because you want your shifter to feel very robust. And also this cheap looking plastic wood look is just not the best. I would have changed it out for another material because it just, it doesn't feel the greatest. And there are some cheaper plastics down below, but that's sort of where this car's price in Volkswagen's lineup. It's not going to have better materials than a Volkswagen R product or say a Audi S3. So it's got to sit sort of in between that. So yeah, it's a pretty nicely built interior. We have bronze stitching up on the dash with some more blue type materials up here on the dashboard too. More bronze around the different air vents, and you've also got heaps of bronze on the steering wheel. We also have a light system that runs across the top of the dashboard, which acts as accent lighting at night, but it also acts as a warning system. Say if your door's open, it lights up in red, or if you have a blind spot, someone in your blind spot, this will light up orange, which is very useful, and I really like that integration. I don't like the integration of the screen here. It feels very stuck on. The UI is pretty good though, so I found it very easy to get used to. It's nice and big and easy to operate, so this takes literally no time to learn at all. But I just wish there was some hard buttons placed throughout the cabin that make it easier instead of having to jump through the screen to do stuff like turning on recycling air conditioning. And also I really don't like these slider buttons down below on the actual screen. They're just a bit, annoying and feel a bit cheap. So yeah, the screen is okay, but it's not my favorite part. I do like the driver's display though. It's very responsive, nice contrast, and really fits the theme of this car quite well with plenty of different customizable views that you can choose from. So I really like that quite a lot. Now I also like how there are physical buttons here on the steering wheel. There's a flat bottom steering wheel with grey contrasting. I also like the grey contrasting around the paddle shifters, which have backlit plus and minus signs, which are very nice and feel like a step above what Volkswagen is doing. So I think that's quite cool, but I don't like the material here on the steering wheel. It just feels a little bit cheap around the airbag protector. Now I really like the floor mats in here, which are like a leather and carpet material with Cupra badging in that, which looks quite cool. And I do like the wireless charger in here, which has little guides in here. So it means that if you put your phone there, it's going to pretty much charge all the time rather than having to sort of constantly adjust it. So it's a great placement and great design. In talking about sporty, I love these two-piece bucket seats that have more bronze stitching on them and now blue leather. So it feels very premium, but what it doesn't feel premium is the fact that this is a manual seat here on the passenger side while I get electrical adjustment, which is just a bit out of place on a car that costs over $60,000. And by the way, this is what your owner's manual looks like now in a Cupra. That's all you're getting. But then here in the glove box as well, we also have a little storage shelf, which is quite interesting. So you can have a little cubby to hide things in there as well, which is very useful. So Cupra Formentor, let's go. VZx, the most powerful drivetrain you can get. It's also got 228 kilowatts, 400 newton meters of torque, 0 to 104.9 seconds, thanks to a 7-speed dual clutch feeding that power through to all 4 wheels. Now immediately what you can tell is that this car does feel a little bit light. It doesn't feel super planted, so it doesn't feel heavy by any means. So it feels, nice and chuckable, would I say? Was that the right word? Sort of feels like something you can sort of throw around and it feels light on its feet. Now, to some, that might feel just a bit tinny. I've had some people say this doesn't feel super luxurious because it doesn't feel heavy, but that doesn't mean it's not. So I think it's a good time to also test launch control, which we can do right now. So if I go into our Cupra mode, go to a full stop, and I put my foot on the brake, foot on the accelerator, launch control is active. Oh my gosh, that is definitely 0 to 100 in the 4.9 second range, and knowing Volkswagen, that stuff's often overstated. Now, and knowing Volkswagen, those figures are often understated, so it might be even quicker than that if you have some proper surfaces to launch off. Now, cornering is quite impressive as well. The lower center of gravity compared to other SUVs makes this a very attractive option as a sort of sporty SUV. Couple of different drive modes to choose from. You have off-road mode, which sort of, allows you to sort of go off-road a bit more confidently and understand that the wheels are all working together to give you as much traction as possible. You have comfort mode, which is so nice. It's very wafty and sort of, allows you to relax, light steering, great for road trips and daily driving, people who don't want a sporty drive. And then finally, we have sport mode, which makes this thing a bit more sporty, but I really don't understand why it'd be in sport mode and not the Cupra mode, which is indicated by the Cupra logo. And that's where all this sporty stuff happens. The exhaust gets a bit burbly and you can hear pops and stuff like that if you start using these paddle shifters, which actually feel quite nice to use. You can hear that, listen. It's coming through, but yeah, little pops and bangs, great, love that. It's not overly aggressive, and Maybe there'll be some people who flash tune this thing to pop and bang excessively, but I do like the sunless, but a little bit of theater that's coming out of the back of this car. Now, what's annoying is that there's these eco tips which pop up. You can turn them off, but it's just weird that in a car that's intended to be super fun to drive, you get eco tips. But then Cupra mode stiffens up the suspension. It makes it gear shift more aggressive, and the whole thing just comes alive. And it's so much fun to sort of drop down a couple of gears and just feed that power on. It just jumps up to the speed limit, but it's still quite enjoyable at the speed limit as well. So overall, it's a very engaging drive. Now, this is going to be controversial for some, but I've driven a lot of Porsche SUVs and a few Volkswagen ones now, but I do feel like the Cupra is offering that similar driving experience as what something like the Macan and all those other sort of Volkswagen performance SUVs do offer on that entry-level end. And so I really think that this is something they should really be pushing in terms of the brand. It's so attractive to have a car that's at this price point, and it's not necessarily going to break the bank if you buy one of these, but you're going to have a ton of fun. And I really think that's where this car is punching well above its weight. Now, this driver's display as well is awesome. You have G meters, you have turbo boost gauges and all that sort of stuff. So I think Cupra have done an amazing job of making a product that isn't just comfortable and luxurious, which I really like how this whole thing is just trimmed and built and finished, but also to have something that's just, you know, exhilarating to drive. I really enjoy driving this thing. I enjoy engaging with the gear paddles. I enjoy just cruising around this thing as well. This thing gets looks. You know, if they're going for a target market, I'm probably definitely dead center of what they're trying to achieve is someone who's looking for, you know, the best type of driving experience without having to spend a whole lot of money as well. So that's something that's really attractive to this brand. That yes, it is more expensive because it's, you know, mid $60,000. We're closing on 70 grand, but I think you're getting a lot of car for that money. And it's also worth noting as well, these brakes are just phenomenal. I've been driving around in a Ute that just sort of didn't have very responsive brakes for the fact that it's a Ute, but then these 4-pot brakes are just so responsive, and they really stop on a dime and do an amazing job of just pulling up nice and quick. But yeah, if there is one thing to criticize this car about is the fact it doesn't feel super planted. So if you want something a bit lower to the ground, then yeah, it would be worth spending a bit more money to get a Golf R, for example. But for a sporty SUV, it's really hard to fault this thing, especially at the price point that it's asking. Now, if I was looking for my next daily driver and I want something a bit more exciting and maybe one last hurrah of the petrol motor before I go and look at a hybrid or an electric car, you're looking at your next car, because this thing costs less than a Golf R, less than an Audi S3, less than a Mercedes AMG 35, but it certainly has the performance chops to make sure that you're actually getting a proper performance car and not just something that looks quick and doesn't go all that fast. And once you sort of get close to this car and see what it's all about, you'll see it's not really worth spending a whole bunch more money to get a Golf R or an Audi S3 unless you're all about that brand recognition or prefer the design of those cars. And so I think Cupra is worth the hype at the moment and exceeds that hype just a little bit. So yeah, well done. I've really enjoyed my first Cupra review and I'm very impressed with this car right here.